Chronicles.
Hi everyone, I'd like to introduce y'all to Brown Boy Chronicles, a podcast by four Indian friends sharing their life experiences and views on the world, talking about their struggles, their come-ups, and just coming together and cracking some jokes. We hope y'all enjoy.
All right, hey guys, welcome back to Brown Boy Chronicles. This week we're bringing on our friend Mahmoud and Khedr, aka Moody. I met Moody through a mutual friend in New York City a couple weeks ago, and I was pretty inspired by his story. And I told the boys, and we're kind of like, let's bring him on. So Moody is an Egyptian immigrant / entrepreneur / all around just good guy from Queens. He runs a startup called Floramind that focuses on mental health education for the youth. So before we get started, I just wanted to preface this episode with a slight trigger warning, since we are talking about mental health and whatever the other sensitive topics associated with it. So let's take it away. Guys, meet Moody.
What's up, y'all? I'm super psyched. I'm excited, and it feels like a really special time to be spending with you all and talking about something I think touches every single human being to one extent. So,
Moody, just know this is going to be bigger than TEDx.
Yes, sir. BBC, let's go.
Yo, Moody, I've seen you do a bunch of public speaking on YouTube and stuff, like TED Talks and other speeches and stuff, but is this your first podcast?
This is not my first, but this is my first brown boy focused podcast with the guys for the culture. I've done a few here and there in the past, but I've never really been big on podcasts, so I'm excited to spend some time today on it.
Cool, man. Should we just kind of start from the beginning? When did you come here from Egypt? Would you go to middle school here, high school, and then we can kind of transition to Floramind from the conversation and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The beginning of time. Let's backtrack. I like to ask people sometimes, when I'm starting to get to know them, you were born and then what? Then what happened? So yeah, my start is in Egypt, in Giza, not too far from the pyramids. I joke around that I was born in the pyramids with some people, and some people are very gullible. They'll believe me and we'll have a joke about it.
Hey, bro, you're a pharaoh? You a pharaoh?
Yes, sir. Oh. In the blood. And I spent the first 12 years of my life in the Middle East, so Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, probably majority in Saudi Arabia, actually 7 years. And then we came to the States. My dad had gotten a job as a translator, and that was our ticket to America for the American dream. And you can imagine we're that family, right? For a lot of us, becoming that immigrant, or you're the first gen, or even second gen, you kind of feel the amount of gratitude, but also the amount of pressure you have. And so landed in Long Island, not too far from Queens, in a little neighborhood called Brentwood, and spent 2 years there. And Brentwood was really tough. Brentwood was one of the kind of lowest income areas. It's a lot of gang activity going on, a lot of influence from different areas. And I think I realized really quickly, which I had a feel of growing up, because when we would move to different even countries in the Middle East, I would be kind of an outcast in a way, because they'd know it's the Egyptian kid. Even Saudi Arabia, I had the Egyptian accent. Jordan, I had the Egyptian, had a little bit of Saudi accent. And then coming here, it's but here it was magnified, because I was the only Arab Muslim brown kid in my class, and that was it made it very apparent. So I got a few years of just I made very few good friends. It was incredibly difficult, and so a lot of bullying, racism, a lot of Osama bin Laden jokes, a lot of stuff like that. Exactly. And I think that if I think initially you think you laugh along initially, and you're just first you don't really understand. I didn't really understand in the beginning, and then people were like, "Oh, this happened here," and I wasn't really aware. I'm 11-year-old, 12-year-old. I wasn't really aware of what had happened with Islam and America that much, especially around kind of 9/11. And so it was 2007 when I came here, so post 9/11, and I got a lot of crap for that. Wasn't very fun.
Did those jokes really affect you? Because at least for me, like, I feel like I got those jokes too in high school and stuff. Like, I feel like most brown kids got those kind of jokes anyways. But it's just, I don't know, either I was desensitized to it or I just didn't, like, I know, like, who I was or whatever. And, like, obviously I'm not a terrorist or anything. So, like, it didn't really affect me. So I was just wondering how you thought of it.
Well, like, he was also in the, you were in, like, the middle of it. Like, you're in New York where, like, 9/11 did happen. So it's probably more concentrated there. Like, people probably heightened and, you know, like, they probably need to lash out. And there's this one person that, you know, is kind of related to what we think happened, you know, like Taliban and stuff like that. So I can see, like, from his side where, like, you know, he's just getting bombarded left and right with, like, jokes and stuff, and, like, you can brush off some in the beginning, but eventually, you know, like, words hurt, so, like, it definitely tends to take a toll on you. I mean, I didn't get it either, like you, KB, but I was, like, in the middle of Pennsylvania, so, like, they didn't really, like, I was kind of in the similar boat as you. So
how's your English at this point? Like, when did you, like, learn English and all that?
I was learning English. I mean, growing up kind of in the Middle East, almost everyone is learning English to some extent.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's taught because English, I mean, this is like the impact of colonialism, I can never say the word, but racism, slavery, colonialist countries who have forced their culture and their language on the world. I mean, a lot of the world has to learn English to some extent, right? Because for you to compete globally, I wouldn't say maybe not majority, but like a good amount, it's always like the second language or the first language. I think growing up in Egypt, it was like, the first language was Arabic, but second language was English. But I had gone to school and I had known enough English to have a conversation, but it was definitely broken. It was noticeable. I remember coming here and having to be pushed back a grade because of it, because of not passing like English exams. But I think, like, KV, you're bringing like a good point up, right? And I think it's interesting to dig deeper into people's stories to see, like, how does it affect certain people and how does it impact certain people growing up, you know, the idea of racism, discrimination. And for others, like, maybe there are things that protected them, or, you know, it's their personality, or there are other factors. And it's hard for me to understand, for example, your story in a few minutes now, but I know for some people, like, I would ask you one question, for example, was your school like super diverse, and did you have like a community or a family outside of school?
My school really wasn't that diverse. It was like mainly white people. Like, I live in suburbia. It was like maybe there was like a couple black kids here and there, and like I guess our Asian population was a little big too, like probably 10-15% compared to like other suburbs. But other than that, it was like mainly white people, and I think for most of us it was like that, like for Deej, Harvey, and Lucky, and me.
And then your family, like, you had extended family here, or was it just immediate family? Like, did you have a big family?
Most of my family did live with me, like when I was younger. My grandparents, my dad's brother, like my uncle, my cousins live with me, but then like they eventually moved to Canada.
Yeah, most of my family is in, like, my mom's side is like entirely in America, my dad's side's entirely in India. But I mean, like, growing up, like, I think the four of us, we all had like, you know, our own cultural communities that we spent like a decent amount of time with outside of like school. So I mean, like, every week, my dad would take me to the temple, like, and just like surround me with other brown kids.
Right.
We all went to white schools, basically. But I don't know. Like, let me ask you guys: do you guys ever play into the stereotype? Like, I did this until like college, and it definitely fucked me up after. But I would make all those jokes and shit, and like put myself, like, you know, like brown shame me, and just like laugh it off so that other people didn't have the power to do it.
I feel like, I mean, first of all, like, for me, it didn't really come up that much. It was just like, I don't know, maybe I was oblivious to it, but I felt like where I grew up, it didn't really happen that much. Maybe I was just fortunate, like, the people that I was around, like, they were considerate or some shit like that. Maybe they did say shit behind my back, but it never really came to me face to face, like, when I was like in middle school. But even when it did, I think it happened like in 10th grade. Like, this kid was just like making jokes about, you know, Indian smelling and stuff like that. I would never like go along with it. I feel like that should just piss me off even more. Like, I don't know. I'm not a confrontation person either, so I would just like kind of walk away from the situation. But I would never like kind of go along with it for the sake of just like being part of the joke. I feel like I'm a little bit more self-worth than that.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. When I say it didn't happen to me, doesn't mean it didn't affect me. Like, we would have to maneuver or avoid the certain stereotypes growing up. There was a story Harvey said a couple podcasts ago about bringing food to the cafeteria and like trying to avoid how people perceived it.
Yeah, I'll just throw it out and not eat. Like, my parents would send me to school with, like, you know what I mean, like Indian food in my lunchbox. I would rather just like starve myself than like have to open that up in front of everybody and like eating that.
For you, Moody, what was it like specifically? I'm just trying to wonder, because I feel like we've all experienced like similar like stereotypes and racism, but was there like one thing that in specific, or was it like a slow buildup?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, right, I think it's those small gradual things over time that build up. And it's also, I think that experience is part of a wider narrative and a wider struggle that I think I'll kind of zoom out a bit later. But I think essentially with my identity and the idea of like, hey, you're not, you know, who you are right now, you're not going to be accepted. You're not going to make friends. You're not going to have that kind of social connection for who you are. So you have to change who you are. And a lot of immigrants, you know, go through this process. In psychology, we call it acculturation, where you go somewhere new and you have to actually manage like two cultures in a way. And it's extremely difficult. You have to manage your own family, your own culture, the values you're growing up, you're being taught, the food, the type of food that you're eating at home, etc., the expectations you have from family, and then the expectations, etc., same thing for the new place that you're in, the expectations and values and whatnot. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm not accepted for this. So I need to form a new identity. And I think it's a great process for a lot of immigrants to be able to do it in a good way and not lose, you know, what they are. But I think for most of them, it doesn't actually, they're not very successful. And that's why generation to generation, you'll see a lot of immigrants also complain that they're losing their language, that they're losing their culture. They feel like their children are like not, you know, who they want them to be in a way. So anyway, for me, it was feeling a deep sense of shame about who I was and feeling like I was blamed for something that I didn't do. And so even when I would try to laugh it off and brush it off, I think over time it was just like, damn, that really hurt, because it wasn't just the words that were impacting me. It was the after effect. And what that after effect looked like is that you're not building deep, meaningful relationships with people. And it's just a lot harder to do, to find those people who will actually accept you for who you are and you'll be able to go to for support. You'll just be able to enjoy some time with. And that's a huge, like, you know, protective factor for mental health issues in the future, is just having social connection, having good relationships. And so I think over time, I just wanted to be less and less of what my parents wanted me to be, who I was really, like my identity being Egyptian, being Muslim. And I just started to form like this new identity that would try to please other people and please kind of that community of being someone who I'm really not, you know.
You have other Muslim people at like your school and stuff? Because New York, I mean, is known to be like pretty diverse, right?
Not on Long Island. And I think when I came to the next place I landed in was here in the city, on another island. That's a theme. I'm an island boy. That's why on Roosevelt Island. And are y'all familiar with Roosevelt Island? You been?
Yeah. That's where Gubball is, right?
No, so I think that's on Governor's Island.
Never mind.
Or Randall's Island.
Yeah, I've been to Roosevelt Island. I've been to like the panorama room. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, yes. Highly recommend. I was just there like 2 weeks ago. Panorama room. So Roosevelt Island is a really interesting place because I was there 12 years ago. We moved to Roosevelt Island, and Roosevelt Island is still one of those secrets in New York City that not a lot of people know about. But around that time, it was really like almost no one knew about it. And we just had like a safe little quiet community. And then we had a few things happen. One of them being Cornell had bought a piece of land that was a lot of the Ivies and schools were bidding on to build a campus on the island. And Cornell ended up winning the contract. They built, I think that happened, a few other things, and just like the prices started shooting up. So we were pushed out. Gentrification 101. We got pushed out to Queens. I love Queens. But anyway, so yeah, even on Roosevelt Island, there was now there a little bit more diversity because I think I got closer to the city. And there, like, I slowly started to make relationships and find people. But at that point, I was really forming a completely new identity. And that point, like, I had already hated who I was, and I was still struggling with that. And I was just creating something new to try to fit in.
So can we just like, I want to just like deep dive. Like, what's your age right now? And then like, so like you were very open about like you went through like a pretty serious bout of depression, correct? Like you were suicidal and all that, right? So can you just like give like, what was all that like build up? When did you peak? When did you like fall over? And now how did that recovery process like come about? Like obviously it was probably multi-factors, things adding up over time. So can you just like spread that out and just like let us be known?
Yeah. So I'm 25 now. So when I had moved to Roosevelt Island, at that point, I was realizing that I was still like struggling internally. And I think when you notice like over time, and this is one of those things, when you try to like voice something and you try to share what's happening in your mind and your heart with family or friends, a lot of us kind of got these responses growing up. It was just like, toughen up, you just get over it. It's not that serious. And a lot of that, I think, was also part of the reason where even if like having those avenues to share, like even the little things, not being able to do that, they build up over time. So I think I kept resorting to new ways to find validation from people. And so just because of that, making stupid mistakes, like hanging out with the wrong people, getting involved with like stupid gang stuff, being in the streets, starting to do drugs. And I think a lot of that at the same time was like, I had the racism, discrimination stuff. Okay, that was happening, but then it became a little bit less over time as I grew up. And then there was like mounting, family pressure, financial. Like I started working when I was 14. I have a big family. We're 11 altogether. And, being immigrants, your dad is working. Mom, of course, couldn't work. She gave up her career to raise us. So starting to work at a young age, starting to have to deal with that. And then just going through these life transitions where you're always trying to figure out how to deal with it emotionally and mentally, and not being able to effectively. And so there was a few events after that as well that just like, I think built up over time. Like there was, I had gotten stuck in Egypt, for example, right after graduating high school. So I was like around 17 at that time. And my father had lost our passports, and I basically missed my first year of college. And that was like another small thing that had happened that it wasn't small at the time. Like it was a pretty big deal for me being younger and being like, I'm missing the most important part of my life right now. And I think you have things like comparison effect, right? You're looking at everyone else is going to college. I'm not. Like my life is shit. Like this sucks. This is horrible. And I think that then you go on to college. And then just challenges, like over time, they just keep changing and new things coming up. I think a lot of college was like feeling the amount of pressure to like continue working and supporting my family, or trying to support my family in that process. So constant burnout of like, I did it all in college. I did all the internships possible, all the programs, starting companies. I think that amount of pressure that just keeps building over time when you're also not knowing how to deal with it.
Moody, can I ask you a quick question? So when you're describing, the metamorphosis that you went through, you come in here at 12, you have to want to be accepted. So you kind of tailor your personality in a way that you are accepted within the cohort you're hanging around with. So I kind of faced a similar dilemma. Like when I came here, I was 9 years old, and then I went back to India 3 years after. So the year that you had to spend 1 year in Egypt, was it like hard for you to get accepted there too? Because like you became like quote unquote whitewashed, like, you probably like kind of tailor your view, like you wanted to be accepted. So you probably forego a little bit of like your true authenticity. But then you went back to Egypt. Did they kind of call you out like, oh, you're not really one of us? Or did you ever experience that in a way, like when you had to spend the year there? Or was it, because when I went to India after, they're like, oh, look who's here. Like, you don't like, you're a different person now, blah, 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 blah. And then I felt like I didn't fit in either worlds. Like I was too brown in America. In India, I was like too white to them. So like I was just like kind of in this purgatory zone where like I'm like, okay, like what do I do? Like, did you face similar things like that? Or
yeah, so the year I ended up taking between high school and college, I was stuck in Egypt, but I was only stuck in Egypt maybe like 5 or 6 months max. I didn't end up spending the year there. I ended up coming back and figuring out some stuff to like work and do stuff like that. But during my time there, I did feel that, you know, it's a very strong feeling to be back home and not feel like you belong. And I think that is a very valid and real feeling that a lot of immigrants have, probably the younger ones who have not gotten to fully develop in their home country or their homeland, or maybe their parents' homeland. And then they come back and, like you're saying, they're Americanized, or they just have a new identity, or they have a new way to look at the world. And people notice that. People notice that immediately. Like people on the street, your own family notices it. Your own family like will make comments about it. And I think it does impact you because it's all part of that wider narrative of like who you are and how you think about yourself and how you think about your identity. And I think it puts an extra level of pressure and an extra level of like thinking to be like, damn, like I don't really feel welcome here. I don't feel like the Egyptian people are amazing. They're beautiful people. And I think that's not what I'm trying to say, but like there are those little things that make you question yourself and be like, I'm not Egyptian enough. I'm not American enough. I'm like some weird in between, and I don't really know what I am.
Yeah, not to like derail your whole like life story, but I was just
no, it's fine.
Yeah, like so because like you and I have like similar upbringings. Like, you know, I'm an immigrant too. Like I came here in 2003. I was 9 years old, so that's why I was like very excited to talk to you, because I think you and I probably share a lot of similarities. Not to the great deal that you probably went to, but like on the surface level. I don't even want to say surface level, but like on the, you know, the stuff that immigrants do feel. I wanted to see like if you actually felt that, because I didn't have that many people that were in the same situation as me growing up. Like I only knew me, and then the brown kids I didn't know, they were all born here. So I felt like I didn't really have anyone to connect to. I couldn't express myself. And then I felt like, you know, I don't know who I am. These people don't accept me. These people don't accept me. In the moment, like when you're like 15, 16, you're not cognizant of like these thoughts. Like you don't know like why you're feeling this way, like being just like kind of tugged on one side and being tugged on the other side. And then now, like as I'm getting older and I reflect back on it, I was like, yo, that was such a difficult period in my time. I can see why like the certain habits I have, the certain way I behave now is because of that. And this might be a kind of a transition to Floramind. Is that like what your overall picture is? Like, you know, in the moment, like for people that are growing up in their teens that are kind of in the similar situation we are, you kind of want to highlight like, it's okay to feel this way. Is that like, you know, like we all been through it. Maybe it's not voiced as enough. It's not like in people's face enough to like, you know, let them know like you're not alone. Is that like the vision that you kind of have with Floramind, or is it like completely different? I know I kind of cut you off with your whole life story, but like I thought this would be a good point to connect Floramind to like what we're talking about.
You're good, Lucky. I think it's a great. Well, I really appreciate when you come in and when you're all like just sharing pieces of your story, because it makes it all that more powerful when we're connecting and just like seeing what's relevant, what relates, even if it's not like the same exact experience. We're all touching on like similar things that were felt in different ways, like even feeling desensitized to like things that are happening. That's like something emotional by itself that's worth unpacking. But I guess to answer your question about Floramind, the short answer is yes, that's definitely part of it. To make young people feel seen, to make them feel heard, to make them feel like they matter, their life matters. I think the first reason I had started Floramind was really that I didn't want young people to kill themselves. That's like the most straightforward reason, you know, and it's really hard to even like say that when I speak in public and tell people, because it's a heavy thing to lay on people, but that's the truth of the matter. I don't want young people to commit suicide, to complete suicide. And that was my build up from kind of that point to like going through college. And I think it was some point between like my sophomore to junior year when things had just like piled up so much that it was everything. It was like the things that I was ignoring from my childhood. It was like the mounting pressure of like providing for family. It was the amount of stuff I was juggling at the same time. It was like the lack of being able to seek help. It was, you know, even events like not small, but like meaningful events. If you're like in a relationship with someone and then you're going through a breakup, like I think all of these things had like reached a breaking point for me where suicidal thoughts were like nonstop. And every day I woke up, I really did not want to live. Every day is like when you wake up, you open your eyes and I'm like, I don't want to experience today. Like, I hate this. Like, I hate my life. I hate the way that like I have to be pushed to like do all this stuff. I hate that like thoughts of my childhood would like come up so often, like what I had been through, even like events that I didn't mention that were like happening because of certain things that I had been through with like the racism discrimination part. I had like gone through a few of those. And I think over time was like, those thoughts became so overwhelming that I thought for myself and what most people, you know, some of you may relate with this, that the only way to like stop the thoughts is to end my life. I was super convinced of that. And I thought this was the only way to get out of this, because if this is what living is like, I would rather experience death. And literally like after I had convinced myself of that, that was like, how old was I? I was like 21. That was my first like suicide attempt. That was back home. And I had done it a few different ways. I'd never like to go into the details of like what I had done, but I had done it 3 different times. And the third or fourth time, it's weird because even with like attempts, your brain like tries to erase a lot of these like extremely traumatic events in your life. But I remember just after every time, it was like a deep sense of like both like fear and relief that it didn't happen. And I think it's a very weird like combination of emotion to feel at the same time. It's like I feel relief that I'm still alive, but at the same time, right after that, like there would be some type of like emotional breakdown, and then I would go on. And this was all like in the matter of like probably less than a year of like all of these happening. And the last one was the one that I was just like, that's it. Like, I know how to like end this the right way. And I wasn't doing it right the first few times. And I had a much more concrete plan to do that. And that's when like my mom had intervened that last time. And it was an incredibly uncomfortable moment. Like I was coming back from college, still living with my parents, and I had gone back home, and I was just, this is the most vivid I remember of like all of them because of like how emotional it was. When I was walking up like the stairs of my house, and my mom just caught me in a very like, I don't know if serendipity, probably God, where she just like caught me, and she's like, okay, like I read the note that you had written, and she showed me the note. And I was just so pissed off that she had the note. And I couldn't believe, I think at the moment was like such an invasion of privacy. I was like, how could she ever like look through my stuff? How could she? That is so disrespectful. And I did not realize it till later that like that moment and then the follow-up from her, that like constant nagging is what I felt like it was. But low key, I felt like someone cared about me, and someone cared enough to like be, even if it made me feel really uncomfortable that she was checking in, she cared enough to do it despite that discomfort, because she wanted me to she wanted to show me that she really cared and that she wanted me to be alive. That's what inspired Floramind down the line. Was like very shortly after that, like I was having a super emotional conversation with 2 of my best friends, and this was in college, and we were all just crying, like grown men crying in the library. Like one of them was Bengali immigrant. The other one was a Chinese American veteran. And we all had like super different like life experiences, different viewpoints on the world, but we all shared that struggle, that pain, that like that type of suffering where you've been through enough to like, to get it. Even it might not be the same exact thing, but like the idea of like, I've been through a lot of shit and I had a breaking point, or almost had a breaking point. And I did not have the resources or support to be able to prevent it or to properly like deal with it. So Floramind, I guess in a way, I'm also realizing now when I'm talking about it with you all, I guess I also did not want to attempt to end my life again. And I think what I said earlier about like not wanting young people to end their lives, in a way, it was probably me not wanting to end my life either, and wanting to start like this journey of understanding mental health and like understanding what it is, what it means, and what do I have to do to like improve myself and like go through some type of healing process, and then give that to the world. It gave me like a sense of purpose.
How long did that transition take, like from that third time when your mom like caught you, and then Floramind becoming like a real thing? Like what was that timeline?
I think it was just kind of the first conversation about Floramind just happened literally like probably 2 or 3 months after the last, it's not an attempt, but like the intention to attempt, the last intention to attempt. The conversation was probably in 2017 of like, hey, we should do something about this. Like that was the conversation happened. Then like, hey, we're all passionate about this. Let's like do something and let's look up some research. And then the point where it became more real was when we applied to a business incubator that helps, students build an idea from scratch. And so I think that was probably when it became real, is like, okay, like what are we calling this thing? That's like not just research and not just us having conversations, but like this is going to be something bigger than that, something with a mission, something with structure to it.
So Moody, quick question. I mean, the way you're describing this whole story, like your mom finding the note, like to me, it just seems like divine intervention, like, like some shit, like it sounds corny, but like there is a reason for you to be here. Like life just works in mysterious ways. Like I know you had to take like care of your family, like financially and all these other, like financial burdens. I mean, not burdens, but like the situations that you were in. After your mom finding out and you kind of like realizing, I don't know if you felt that way. Did it feel like divine intervention? Like it was just like, like you felt like, before you said you felt fear and thankful that like, the attempts didn't like succeed. Before you even get to the attempt, like, you're having this person like, your mother, not even like as someone random, like your kin, like caring about you. Did it give you kind of like more of a purpose outside of just like, helping your family out, or, like give you more of a profound meaning to your life? I'm here for a purpose, and maybe that drove you to the push for Floramind, or did you always already have that, like, the drive and like, I'm here for a reason, or like, do you even think about that kind of stuff when you were?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think looking back, I would classify it as divine intervention. It's funny you use that like very specific term, because literally like 2 days ago, I was just like reflecting on something very specific we can get into later about like the amount of negative emotions and thoughts and feelings that we have in a day, and how sometimes we will have divine intervention come in, and literally that's the word I used written down, that will like help us get out of things or guide us out of it. But to get back to your point, I always had some type of drive. I've always been like super optimistic. And that's I think the thing that people were surprised by when they hear my story, especially people that know me. I've always been that guy that's like optimistic. I'm like, I was in high school, like I had eventually found, and I think this is like, it's part of the story. And I guess I don't get all the time always to dig deeper into the stuff, but like, for example, in high school, there was this business program called Virtual Enterprise that I had been through. And it was basically like helping young high school people learn kind of fundamental business and run a virtual business, like a fake virtual business. And there, like a mentor stepped in, and he was like one of the early interventions into my life that was like, hey, like you're doing something wrong. Like I see you coming in here every day. You look high. You look like something is wrong with you. Like, let's talk about it. And I think, anyway, so I had always some type of drive for business, and I was excited. I was doing competitions like in high school and in college, like I said, I was doing all these different internships. I was, I'd intern at Facebook when I was a fresh sophomore. I had done things in tech. I had started another company before Floramind, but it was more like a project for food vendors. So I think the drive was there. I think the purpose, like you're saying, like, I think mental health, it was clear to me when I like had kind of like made it through and started the conversation. I was like, oh shit, like I feel like this is actually what I'm here for. Like I think this is the reason I had been through what I've been through, and I was starting to make the connections looking backwards. Like all the pain and struggle that I had been through had gotten me to that point. And I think it did start mentally. I started to make better sense of my story and putting meaning behind the suffering. And this is something like a few psychologists talk a lot about. There's a book called, what is it called, by this amazing psychologist who talks about the power of meaning. It's slipping my mind right now, but I think he had been through the Holocaust, and he talks about how suffering, if you're able to put a meaning behind your suffering, that is like one of the most extremely powerful things. And I think that's what I was able to do then, is like I've been through certain things and this is why. And it wasn't like because I was a shitty person. It wasn't because I had deserved it. It wasn't because like, you know, all the negative thoughts that come with like going through something hard. So yeah, it did give me purpose and it gave me a stronger reason to continue. And I think maybe one of the strongest reasons, yeah, to keep moving forward.
For a while, I couldn't really understand why people do some of the stuff that they do, like when they're depressed. Like one of the things was like cutting themselves and stuff. And it finally clicked to me when I read something somewhere. It was that like these people end up feeling so much on the inside that they just want to like feel it like physically. And that like, I was like, oh shit, that makes sense now. Like, and it really stuck with me. I'm like, damn, that's like why these people do it.
That's a great point, KV. And that's when we talk about coping mechanisms, how people cope with pain, suffering, trauma. Those are all different ways that people choose to cope. And unfortunately, like you're saying, some of the really negative ways that we cope with pain are like self-harm. So self-cutting, there's a lot of research behind it and like why people do self-cutting, for example, specifically. People say a lot of different things. One of them being, a lot of it being around a release, some type of like release from the body. Like you want to release and feel the pain that you're going through release in a way. And it feels like because you're cutting, that release like helps the pain in a way. Yeah, a lot of it is like for people to try to transfer the pain into something, because if you keep it in all the time, it will like destroy you in like ways. I don't even know if there's like research around this, but there always has to be some type of release, negative or positive. And so the coping mechanisms that we choose, a lot of them are negative because usually we're either not taught the positive ones, or if we're taught the positive ones, they are harder to do. And so we'll rather resort to the negative ones. And they might feel like they help us in the moment, but of course, usually like they're really detrimental.
What I think it happens is like, you know, you just kind of become numb. The only thing you feel is, I mean, obviously I've never been through this particular situation. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough. I feel like I had a coping mechanism, even though I was like getting a tug of war. I would just like play video games, and that was just like my zen. Like I would just hyper focus on this thing, and you know, I'd spend hours just playing video games, and that's where I extracted my joy from. Like my sisters were very older than me. It kind of felt like I was the only child because I didn't have anyone to talk to. The only thing that I could like, you know, focus everything onto was like a video game. So I just channeled all my frustrations and took it out on motherfuckers online, you know, just like playing video games and shit like that. Yep. So like I'm very fortunate to like that I had that. But for people that don't really know, like they have like that escape, like, you know, video games or like working out or anything like that, because you don't know if that's like what coping is at that age. Like you don't know that this outlet is a release for you. You in the moment are just so overwhelmed with like pain, suffering, that you kind of get numb to everything else. The only thing that you know is this pain, so that's all emotional. Then you try to release it physically, and I think that's like the connection in my mind, like why people like cut themselves, or it's because you're just so numb, and then the only thing you do know is pain. So that pain, you're trying to translate it to physical rather than emotional. I don't know if that's true, but like to your point, KB, when I was like thinking about it, like what you said, I wonder if that's like the case for why like people like cut themselves, or, you know, it's just like, cause you don't have any other coping mechanism. And then like what he's trying, like what Moody's just saying, you need a release. I wonder if that's like the case.
Yeah. Yo, Moody, so 2-part question for you. Mm-hmm. Why do you think like depression and all this is so prevalent in this like youth community now and day and age in our society? And like why, in my personal belief, I don't think depression was as prominent in our older generations. Cause I mean, I feel like they were like a little bit like tougher, like toughing it out, or they just, you know what I mean? They just like went through many hardships as well. Some that are probably incomparable to the hardships that we go through. But it seems like our older generations, our parents never really, well, maybe they just don't admit that they went to depression, or they just don't know what it is. So can you just like differentiate between like the generational gap of like depression prevalence and why it is becoming so prevalent now? Or is it just like easier to become depressed now in this day and age?
So personally, I believe like there's more awareness recently. Like you have rappers like Logic and stuff singing about like depression and stuff and suicide. And I think like overall too, like social media and stuff is just bad for us. It just makes you kind of compare yourself to people all day.
Yeah. So great question, Harvey. And I think KV, you touched on like two really good points, right? There is a lot of research trying to understand this now. And there's a few things that people are pointing to in terms of like trying to know, like, why does it seem like right now there's like some type of insane emergency and crisis like around youth mental health? What has changed, 20 years ago to now? I think, the first point is just that I think that awareness is a big piece. What young people were going through 20, 30 years ago, it changed in certain ways, but it also, like you said, people have always been struggling with different things. I think if you look at kind of some of the data around the prevalence of, for example, suicide attempts between young people, it's really heartbreaking to see, but we are at an all-time high when you compare it to like older generations. And I think it's hard to attribute like what is the specific reason to that. But we know, one, just gaining more awareness of like, and the stigma lowering helps us have more data. So if, for example, 10 years ago, the data was like, okay, well, we know 1 in 4 young people have some type of mental health disorder. That was really about 1 in 4 young people who reported it and like were clinically diagnosed by a professional, right? We now have so much more access to mental health services, and we have so much more awareness and lower stigma. I was saying it a few years ago that I actually thought it was like 4 in 4 people might, maybe not mental health disorder, but go through some type of major mental health challenge, like at least once a year, and are suffering in silence. And so I think a lot of the time we might have had better coping. It really depends also on a US perspective, but also like socioeconomic perspective, wealth. There are so many factors to this stuff. And I'm trying to like give you, there's no short answer to it, but I'll give you like one example. So we look at a lot of the things that affect mental health, for example, to try to understand this question. And there's a good kind of like framework to understand it called the social determinants of health. And it helps us see like, what are the key factors that influence people's health in different ways, right? And so some stuff that you'll all guess, right? So like where you grow up, your socioeconomic status, the type of food you have access to, and it goes on to like, I think 6 different points that are critical to like what you end up experiencing in your health outcomes. And actually through those, the social determinants of health, we can tell like exact kind of a very strong prediction of your health outcomes, like stuff around if you're going to have diabetes or not, when you're going to die. Also includes race, ethnicity, it includes employment, etc. And so it depends on a case by case basis, but I think overall you have the increase in awareness. And so more people are asking for help. So more clinicians are diagnosing people. And so we're seeing the data come, and we also have more capabilities to record data, which is all good stuff. So people could have been struggling in the past. We just don't have access to it. Of course, like we're struggling with different things now. I think KV mentioned social media, for example. Social media is one of the most alarming and most kind of disturbing things that I think a lot of psychologists and researchers like finding on how it impacts young people. I think, of course, in a few different ways. One of the main ways that people talk about, of course, is like, there's the bullying stuff. First, you could bully me in school and we'll be good. And now you can bully me any time of the day. You can come at me anytime. And the tools were taking so long to be developed. So now there's more tools to block people, to like restrict people, to really like have a safer social media experience. But for a lot of young people growing up the last 10 years, it's been so exposed that like anyone can harm you online. Anyone can reach out to you. I was just listening to a story about sexual predators and what they're able to reach young people and the impact they're able to have just by like conversations, pictures, and actually like human trafficking. So there are so many things there. I think, of course, like we have just young people spending a lot of time on their devices. Mm-hmm. If you think about, for example, if you compare it to 20 years ago, we were all more physically active. We were all more outside. We were all more with friends, within some type of community. Even if we've been through certain struggles, that is a protective factor. That is something that helped us not become worse with our health, with our mental health, with our physical, spiritual health. We have a lot less of that now. Of course, COVID did not make things better and forced people to stay home, forced increased usage of screens, etc. in a way. And so you have so many factors that are like compiling on each other, and they're all overwhelming. And
that's
because,
like one opinion that I have. I mean, there's obviously, I agree, there's definitely multi-factors, but I think one opinion I have is that like everybody's just chasing like the next high in terms of especially like US population, because they see so much. They know what like is capable. They know what they could access. They could be driving this next hot car. They could be with like this kind of chick. They could be going on this kind of vacation. And like, they're just always in this constant like mindset of wanting and needing and not being present. Whereas like you might look at like some kids in like Egypt or Africa who are not even aware of what is all out there. And they're just so in tune. They don't have everything that like we have, but they're just present and like they are thankful, right? And they make the best of their life and they enjoy those little moments.
All right, guys, thanks for listening to the Brown Boy Chronicles podcast. We are available on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and YouTube. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at the Brown Boy Chronicles and our Twitter at the bbcpod. If you enjoy our content, we would appreciate it if you guys could take the time to review, like, and subscribe. If you have any other questions or business inquiries, please email us at brownboychronicles1@gmail.com. Thank you.